Tired of bloating, fatigue, and sluggish digestion? Meet your gut's new best friend, NutriHealth 365's microbiome supplement. Restore balance, boost immunity, and feel amazing from the inside out. Smart delay release capsules. Real results. Gut health just got personal.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Friday's episode of Trending. I hope you're well wherever you are in the world. Well, we're going to start with the obvious major story that's breaking here in the UK, and it will have effects around the world, and that's Prince Andrew is no longer Prince Andrew. Years and years after these allegations about his friendship with Jeffrey Epstein and his, the fact that he was at these parties and he was accused by many different people actually of sexually assaulting them when they would have been very, very young as part of these trafficking rings that Epstein was very much a part of and a procurer of. And somehow he got away with it for quite a long time. He got a bit of public questioning, but still lived in his multi-million pound mansion, still was a prince, still did royal engagements and so on. And then a few years ago, he stepped back as a senior royal, if you like, and didn't do these engagements and things like that. And then in recent weeks, he's had more and more titles been taken off of him, including military honours, which he definitely didn't earn serving in the military. He was just given. And this morning, you wake up to the news that he's no longer Prince Andrew. He's just Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. Two of the most sinister surnames when you look into them you could possibly have when you look into the families and what people with those surnames have been up to. Now, the reason that he's had this stripped is because since Virginia Griffey, or Virginia Roberts as she was known, one of his most prominent accusers, since she died a few weeks ago, a book has been released where she names quite a few people, actually, not just Prince Andrew, but goes into more detail about his crimes and what he did to her. And there's lots of family members and people around the book that have been very, very persistent in ensuring that what's happened here today happens. So here's the story. King Charles, we'll come back to him, last night sensationally stripped Andrew of his prince title and threw him out of the home he had for decades. That's the home that it also transpires he's never once paid rent on. But a royal biographer has warned this is not the end of the humiliation for the disgraced ex-duke. Today, the monarch's brother wakes up as Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, as I said, with a police probe into his behaviour likely on the horizon. Now, two things we're going to dive into. We're going to dive into, firstly, that part about a police probe. Now, when you look at all the institutions in this country, from the government to the prison service, to the police, to the armed forces, what are they? They are HM, His Majesty's or Her Majesty's Armed Forces, Her Majesty's Government, Her Majesty's Revenue and Custom, Her Majesty's or His Majesty's Treasury. It's all His Majesty's. So therefore, when it comes to the investigation of an active royal, they're not going to get investigated in the same way that you or I would have done. Hence why, if you remember not too long ago, when they wanted to serve Prince Andrew, or Andrew I should say now, with papers, with court papers, he just hid himself away in his house and didn't leave. So he couldn't get served with them. And in the end, a security guard actually took them on his behalf, which they shouldn't have done, to be fair, and he got served. But that just goes to show that it is one rule for them and one rule for everybody else. Because you can't have a police service or an armed forces or even a government that belongs to somebody, which that HM title suggests it does. It's His Majesty's government. How is that going to investigate everyone, including the royals, equally? Well, it's obviously not. That is the most blatant, in-your-face example, open and shut with that evidence, that there is a two-tier system. And one thing that I have always found strange is anyone that is a royal, like a royalist and loves the royals. I've never understood that. Even before I was old enough to understand really what was going on and start researching this information on my own, and you figure out what exactly these sort of people get up to. Even before that, I've never understood why somebody would queue up with a big flag to watch somebody waving. I don't understand why you'd have these children that are born into incredible privilege that then go on to become princes and kings and queens when they haven't done anything. And always found that bizarre. I've always found it very bizarre as well, the amount of people in the truth movement that would consider themselves royalists. That got shown and highlighted when the Queen died a few years ago. The amount of people that called out COVID and were calling out the government's overreach and things like that, then all of a sudden were absolutely falling to pieces when the Queen died. I was very, very bemused by that. I think this whole concept of the patriot and being a patriot of the nation means you must be a royalist. Well, that doesn't make any sense, because if you're a patriot of a nation, it's got nothing to do with one particular family, has it? Just like it's got nothing to do with one particular politician or one particular party. It's about the values of the nation. And believe me, you don't have to scratch the surface of the English royals, British royals very much, to realise that the values that they hold and the things they get up to, do you really want to align with that? Now, we're going to come back to King Charles, which is the second point I wanted to make, which is what I was saying at the top. So Charles is famous for a very, very high profile and out in the open friendship with Jimmy Savile, former BBC disc jockey and notorious, record-breaking, prolific paedophile, procurer of children. Used to have sex with dead bodies, just basically anything despicable, creepy, disgusting and abhorrent you can think of. Savile was probably a part of it. And that has never been brought into question, really. It was even told by Diana in a book a long time ago that Charles wanted Savile to be William's godfather. And that didn't transpire in the end. Probably because they knew eventually the stories about his goings-on would come out and that would damage Charles and William's ascension to the throne. However, the questioning of their friendship is basically never done. All the focus is on Prince Andrew, who clearly had a very, very close friendship with Jeffrey Epstein, clearly knew what Epstein was doing, and clearly took part in the parties and the rituals alongside him. I'm sure Virginia Griffey is one of many. However, you've got the king, you've got the man on the throne, who all those institutions that I spoke of technically is owned by right now, including your government, including your tax office, including your military, including all your public services. His best mate was the most notorious and high-profile paedophile in this country's history, who I don't even want to think about how many victims there would be in Savile's wake and how many people he would connect into in other areas of the establishment, the entertainment industry and politics. And that's fine. That's not up for question. Now, I'll ask you this. If you lived in a street and in the street there was a family and there was two brothers in that family, both of them were friends with different famous, notorious, prolific paedophiles. In the way that you've got Andrew, close friends with Epstein, Charles, close friends with Savile. Would you not ask a few questions of the family? I think you would. I don't think people would be queuing up to wave Union Jacks and eulogise over this family. I think people would be calling them out. I think people would be asking questions of the mum and dad. People would be asking questions of the other siblings going, what is going on here? What are the statistical chances of that? And what is it with the psychology of you guys? There's something not right. Clearly, look at you. Why are you surrounding yourselves with these types of people? Well, what if the simple answer to that is that they are these types of people? Many investigators and researchers that have looked deeply into the royals, and not even that deeply to be fair on occasion, connect them into some incredibly sinister things, satanic things. You know, most people with a brain cell on active duty believe that now King Charles, the then Prince Charles and the royals had involvement in the death of Princess Diana in Paris all those years ago. Most people would acknowledge that they have at least some questions. Apart from the most devout royalists, they can do whatever they want, people who would probably even defend some of the things I'm talking about here today, like the friendships with Epstein and Savile. They probably defend them and say it's all right, they're royals, they should be held to a different account. They might dismiss you. However, most others will go, yeah, I can see there's a potential there. There's a few questions to be asked. Okay, so if you just look at those three things in isolation, you think he might have been involved, or the family might have been involved in the death of a princess in pretty extreme circumstances in the Pont d'Alma tunnel in Paris. He's then friends with Britain's most notorious paedophile. When it transpired from people that spoke out after Savile's death, everyone, or a lot of people certainly, knew what he was up to. And at best, he was a very, very obviously creepy, sinister guy. You've only got to look at that picture that people throw up of my dad when he was on a show with him on Breakfast on the BBC all those years ago, and you can see David's incredibly young in that, and you see Savile start talking, and you just see Dad start going like that, leaning away, as if like, I don't want to be anywhere near you. I don't want to be anywhere near you, mate. I don't know, there's something about it, it's just creepy. He doesn't even necessarily have to say anything creepy, and he did that a fair few times either, but just his whole demeanour, his whole mannerisms, his whole persona. How did no one question it? Yeah, he's close to Charles, the then prince. It then transpires after his death, all the things that he was up to. You've then got the other brother, who is friends with Epstein, accused many times, including by Virginia Griffey and Virginia Roberts, and photographic evidence is shown of that. He's admitted to going to Epstein's house in New York after Epstein got out of prison for a sexual offence. How are you now not demanding these people get out of that palace? How are you not demanding there is full-scale inquiries into this? And I know it's His Majesty's government and His Majesty's police and prison and all that, but they can't ignore millions of people demanding an inquiry into this, demanding these questions be answered. They might ignore a few, but they can't ignore millions and millions of people doing that. They could try, but it's not going to go very well for them. These people only sit in those positions because we acquiesce and we allow them to. Like I said, if this was a family in your street, would you want to live near them? Let alone, would you let them hoard so much of the wealth of the country, so much of the land of the country, be ones that dictate X, Y, and Z? Because we're told now that the monarch in this country is a figurehead and they don't hold any power because we're a democracy and it's the politicians that hold the real power and we elect them, so therefore this is a democratic society. Well, it's still His Majesty's government. He still is the one that has to give permission for somebody to form a government. They still have a weekly audience with the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister has to go to them to resign. So I don't believe for a second they're a figurehead. They still have all this influence in the wider world through the Commonwealth in countries like Australia and Canada and parts of Africa and Asia. This is absolutely despicable. But why now? This is my question. Why now? Final one I'll talk about on this particular subject. Well, it's clear that the royals' image has been severely damaged over the last few years by a combination of things. You know, Camilla is very unpopular. Charles has always been very unpopular for some of the reasons I alluded to there. Harry was generally considered the most popular and likeable royal. Obviously, he then disappeared off the face of the earth when he married Meghan Markle, and there were scandals around that and his book. The Queen died, which for everybody living in this country pretty much had only ever known the Queen as the head of state because she lived and reigned for such a long time. So obviously for me, when I was born, she was the Queen. And for people even, considerably older than that, even of my dad's generation, the Queen was the Queen. So there was a real changing of the guard when she died. And as I said, the man that took over and has taken over was not particularly popular and is not particularly popular. So it's clear to me that they are trying to rebrand the royals as a kind of modern family, and no pun intended, great show. And it's clear that they're kind of paving the way for William, I think, William and Kate, who to many were considered quite popular, and everything that she's had to deal with in the last couple of years and all the stories around her health have, probably led a lot of people to have some sympathy towards her, and she was always considered a very likeable figure. It's kind of paving the way for them, and William's become a lot more active in the public and doing interviews and being seen in more social circles. He's a big football fan. He's been on these football podcasts and all those kind of things, trying to portray him as a man of the people and a real person. So for me, this is a PR exercise. It's throwing Andrew out to the wolves for things he's done, not saying he shouldn't be, while trying to deflect away from other things that they don't want you to look at. Because as I said, if this was another family and you had all these connections into all these dodgy people, you would be asking questions of the family. You would not just be asking questions of one member of it. Yet they're trying to deflect any attention away from any other family member by just chucking all the things at Andrew. They did the same when Jimmy Savile died, because Jimmy Savile died and everything was about what he did, and what he did was absolutely horrific. But do you really think it's just him? Do you not really think he tied into a bigger circle, a bigger web that would have included people that were probably still alive? Exactly the same way with Jeffrey Epstein. Ghislaine Maxwell is now in prison for trafficking to who? There's been no arrests. There's the client list Trump has buried because his name's probably on it. And the right-wing media, the freedom media are silent on that issue. So the fact that they are doing this now, there is a timing to this clearly, because these people don't do things by accident. They're doing this for a particular reason. And it's probably a rebadging, rebranding exercise because they know their popularity is not good. So, we'll see what happens here. But like I say, Andrew deserves to lose everything he's got. He deserves to face prison. But so do the others that are involved in this. And there's a lot more of them as well. So when they start asking questions of Charles and his friendship with Savile, when they start asking more questions about the different connections between this person, and this person, I'll start to get a bit more interested and take this seriously. But for today, anyone that was a victim of Andrew will feel a slight sense of justice, I would assume. And to all of those people, I hope this gives you some kind of satisfaction that he's at least facing some consequences for his action. Nowhere near as severe as he should, but maybe this is just the beginning. Well, if you're watching with us on YouTube or Twitter, thank you for joining us. Head over to iconic.com to watch the rest of the show, where we're going to talk about yet another asylum attack here in the UK. We're going to talk about Rachel Reaves' hypocrisy on her house license to rent. And we're going to talk about a nice good news story to end the week that will make you smile. So click the link below. If not, I'll be back with you on Monday morning at 10 o'clock. Bye for now.